Be seated. Good Shabbat, everyone. And always so nice to be together. And as I mentioned before, I love the quality of the gathered people, both live stream and in our sanctuary. And as I mentioned, we began reading the book of Numbers this week, and it opened with a census. You might have heard that phrase, Pekod, Pekudehem, Ufkudat, a number of times. That is the word for taking the census. After the rather arcane matters that we have been reading about in recent weeks, the sacrificial cult, laws of purity and impurity, skin eruptions, bodily discharges, and so on, the monotony and repetitiveness of today's reading comes almost as a relief. The chieftains of each tribe are named, and an identical formula is recited, concluding with the number of men over the age of 20, fighting men in each tribe. For this is not a census of the entire people. Rather, it is an accounting of those who will make up an army to cross the desert. The Israelites have just celebrated the first anniversary of their liberation from Egypt. They think they will shortly enter the promised land, but they are about to embark on something like a 38-year sojourn. So perhaps unsurprisingly, they form an army to ensure a smooth crossing of the wilderness. Yet we may ask, why the preoccupation with numbers and with exact numbers? The Bible's preoccupation with numbers parallels our own. Lends specificity and veracity to a narrative. Whether it is the number of lost lives in a mass shooting incident, or homes lost in a wildfire, or the number of career home runs for a baseball player, numbers are concrete to us. We can wrap our heads around them. They give the reader a means of taking hold of the story, whether it is a Torah story or a life story or a fictional story. Abraham was promised that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and as numerous as the sands on the sea. And yet here are Abraham's descendants, and we are told precisely how many there are. Excuse me, or at least how many fighting men. Furthermore, large numbers have a way of lending gravity and importance to what is being described. Quantitative descriptions provoke an emotional response that qualitative descriptions often do not. We have a tendency to make judgments based on numbers and not make the effort to look beyond the raw data in our evaluations. Although numbers may excite us, frighten us, or bore us, depending on our mood and the day and what we're talking about, they do lend interest and even gravitas to a story, at least superficially. Yet by themselves, numbers do not lead to a deep understanding of either a text or a life. So let's take a little deeper dive into the Torah's numbers. At the time of the Exodus, as it states in Exodus chapter 12, the Israelites comprised approximately 600,000 men, not including women and children. Now, after a year in the wilderness in the Midbar, even after the killing of some 3,000 individuals associated with the golden calf incident, as well as the death of even more in the ensuing plague, the Israelites have increased in number. They are now, according to the census, 603,550 men of fighting age, not counting 22,000 Levite males over the age of 1 month. Modern Bible scholars, of course, have shown that these numbers cannot be understood literally. In fact, if that were the case, it would have the going out of Egypt, as some were getting to Mount Sinai, it would take 50 more years for all of them to get to Mount Sinai and out of Egypt. So the numbers clearly cannot be literal numbers, but nonetheless, the specificity and the consistency is intriguing. The census occurs on several levels of particularity. The heads of the tribes are mentioned individually by name, and each paragraph concludes with the number of men in each tribal family. Within these paragraphs, we're told that the counting of the tribe as a whole was done according to clans and subdivided further into those ancestral houses, and that those in the census were counted by name. B'mispar shemot, it says, though we're not given the names of every single person or even the names of every ancestral house. Finally, we're told the grand total of fighting men among the Israelites. The census of the Levites, carried out separately from the general census, proceeds in a similar manner, citing the names of the heads of the clans and the numbers in each clan before enumerating the total number of Levites over the age of 1 month. What I find meaningful in these numbers crunching of the Torah, not that they're true, not that they just lend gravitas to the storytelling of our people's story, but that we have a clear intentionality about juxtaposing the individual and the collective. We get a total number of Israelites, but we are told that it is made up of individuals who have names, relationships, histories, and lives. The Slonim Rebbe, in his commentary on Numbers, opines that the number of Israelites mentioned here, 603,550, is equal to the number of words in the Torah. I did not spend time going through the Sefer Torah, counting each word to see if he is technically correct, but I'm going to take him for his word. And the point is that just as the Torah is a unity made up of individual words, the people of Israel is a unity made up of individuals. Remove even one word from the Torah is no longer kosher to be read. The Torah's collectivity, the Torah's sense of oneness is marred by even one word being removed or impaired. Similarly, if even one person is not counted, then Israel cannot receive the Torah. We are not a full people if anyone is left out of our peoplehood for any reason. If anyone is left out of our communal religiosity, whether on the basis of gender or orientation or any other reason at all, we're not actually being true to the Torah or to the wisdom that the Slonim Rebbe shows us that is built into the Torah's juxtaposing of both the concern for individuals and the concern for the collective, both as the people are preparing to do the work of Torah in marching toward a promised land, to keep in mind the worthiness of our community, of our Klal Yisrael, and the worthiness and preciousness of each individual. We don't want individuals to get lost in the swamp of community, and we don't want individuals to not think about the preciousness of their community or to take it for granted. This is why the Slonim Rebbe suggests that in most every year, the parsha of which we just read an extract is read on the Shabbat immediately preceding Shavuot every year. That as we go into Shavuot, as we go to re-hear the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments, and to re-accept Torah in our lives, to keep in mind the power of our own individual worth and potential to contribute to Jewish community, and the potential of Torah and Jewish community to contribute to us. But only if we march through on a path that the Jewish people and I in my heart and Torah are one. the census is meant to remind us that the act of Kabbalat HaTorah, the receiving of the Torah, is an individual one performed collectively in community. For Jews, spirituality is not only in our hearts, and Torah is not just an abstract concept. Stated conversely, receiving the Torah is a collective act that each of us do individually within our hearts. The fulfillment of the Torah, the Slonim Rebbe teaches, can only be accomplished when Klal Yisrael acts in unity. That is, we have to find what unites us and to move forward with that, even acknowledging personal differences. So the use of numbers, any numbers that are meant to divide us, to emphasize differences rather than similarities, to create disunity and dissension, is not only a misuse and a misrepresentation, but a violation of the collective effort needed to bring light to the world. I say this not only in the light that we're going to receive Torah in the next day of Shavuot, where we can no longer afford to marginalize any individual Jew or other Jewish communities, nor should we use numbers to disparage them. It is not useful to say that there's more conservative Jews X than there are other kinds of Jews Y, or more Orthodox Jews do X and one's Y, and to use that as a way of dividing us or saying one is better than the other. You can say one is better for me, but you can't say one is better for the entire Jewish people. That is a misrepresentation and a violation of the Torah reading's message today, and this, as the Slonim Rebbe has shown us. It is also not useful to use data about gun violence in a way that gets us to inaction on the need to protect the lives of our children, who now no longer really want to go to school and are actually getting ill when they wake up in the morning because they actually have to go to school. And they're worried whether they'll come home. And parents are worried if they'll come home. And mental health is declining because of this huge strain. And there are people who are going to find a way to make the statistics sound like it's really not bad. Or there's no reason to make any law that inhibits somebody's right to use a gun anywhere. Let kids bring guns to school. Or let's have, what could possibly go wrong? Why not arm every single adult in the school, if not the kids? The use of statistics not to bring people together is, as I said, a misuse and a misrepresentation and a violation of the collective effort needed. It is also the case that on the other side of the aisle, those who say that we shouldn't pass any legislation until it's perfected and enough to know that that'll stop gun violence forever, means that we should never pass a single piece of legislation because we'll never get to that place. That also is a violation and a misuse of data to say don't do anything until we can do everything. We actually have to do what's practical, realistic, and appropriate for the moment. And if what we can build consensus toward is sensible universal background checks nationally, to not allow people on the no-fly list or terrorist watch list or who have known proven mental illness not to be allowed to buy guns, to not allow teenagers to buy assault weapons, which are only used to kill people, are not used for hunting or for sport. Those are the doable, reachable, attainable things possibly in this moment. And those people who say don't do it until you get more than that, are living in the same alternate universe of the people who don't want any infringement at all, any restrictions on gun use. Because after all, personal freedoms and gun use are more appropriate than children dying and our bigger concern. In getting perfect legislation, let's let kids die until people get there. Both of those are so highly mistaken and so non-Torah. But both of them are going to marginalize statistics. The statistics you need to know are what we see in front of our eyes. Kids are dying. Children are dying. There are mass shootings happening pretty much every day. Or at least there's gun violence, 4 mass shootings a week. 321 people are being shot every day in this country. That is not going to go away without legislation and can't wait till perfect legislation. Both sides need to care about saving children and to listen to the 75% in the majority or higher who want these things passed and are really unimpressed by the self-righteousness, zealousness of both sides. When we stand on Sunday morning, symbolically at Mount Sinai, rising to hear the Aseret HaDibrot and to receive the Torah again, we have to continue to remember that while we do so as individuals, the act can only have true meaning if we do so as part of the collective, as part of a wider universe of the Jewish people. And as Americans, we do so as part of an American family.